Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And I've just been talking with Lambros and Joy and Tariq and Ethan. And I'm kind of like, I want to talk about something entirely different. And I'm really feeling like I grew up in a Black Pentecostal church, and you step on the stage, they say they're going to talk about something, and they do something entirely different. But I'm resisting that urge. So I'm going to try and stay on track and talk to you about gun fingers and gang signs. So as Tariq said, I'm doing a PhD at the University of Glasgow, and it's in a broad sense about Black music and resistance, but I'm thinking about the blues as the infrastructure for all of these things, which you can talk to me more about, because currently I'm just going to do a lot of feminine R&B. It's not at the forefront of my mind. But that work is based or is heavily like influenced by this book, my book called Deep in It, Colonialism, Culture and Criminalization of UK Drill. And one of the key things, I'm like, am I just pressing, how do I move this forward?
I think the iron will just click, maybe.
That's what I do. Technology in this room is not kind to us today. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
You can just, so let me.
Okay, while this is happening, sorry, I'm very
Well, so you look, you can just.
Okay, I can click. No, okay, cool, thank you. Okay, while this is happening, I'm going to be talking a lot about embodied expression and Black collective creative resistance through expression. And we've heard a lot of tunes. I was not here this morning, so I apologize for any repetition. And thank you, Lambros and Joy, for I think you were playing some music. Lambros, you definitely were. So one thing I like to think about when I'm talking about drill is its musical lineage and its feeling, its embodiment, which we're going to talk about today through gun fingers, which is this, if you don't know. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to do a little beat making with the body. So like you heard in that song, Attempted One, there's a very specific kind of template for a drill beat, which was my introduction to drill. I produced music and I spent a long time on YouTube listening to type beats and learning how to make music and stuff. And the first thing that taught me with drill, I work now a lot about the lyrics. We talk a lot about the violence in the expression, but there's something also in the sound, in the sonic, in the super segment. So yeah, we're gonna make a little drill beat, so you're all in the same vibe as me. I don't want anybody to feel like you're not on the same frequency. So the basics of a drill beat goes like this. You're just gonna have to stamp and clap. So I'm gonna walk you through it, so don't worry. So I'm gonna be the hi-hat, you guys are gonna be the kick and the snare, the foundations of any good beat. Okay. So the drill beat will go something like this. Okay, you can hear me. That's what I'm gonna do it with you. You can join me anytime. Okay, then the hi-hat's like that song in his heart.
Yeah,
Okay, so that is the foundations of drill as like a beat. And as you see, whenever I'm listening, it makes me want to copy the feeling of the beat. So that's the foundations that we're working on. A second foundation that we're working on is the concept of crime itself. Kind of hear a lot about criminality and criminalization and stuff. And Lambros has really set the scene for this, so I don't need to belabor the point. But I just want to speak a little bit about colonialism and why that's an important thing to discuss when we're thinking about the criminalization of drill, and specifically the anti-Blackness inherent in colonialism as a technology. So thinking with people like Celia Hartman, who Lambros mentioned, it's really important to think about colonialism, imperialism, anti-Blackness as structural, not an event. It's not time bound. It's this thing that we got past and we're in post-colonialism through independence. It's a structural thing that's continuing to lay the foundation for not just our criminal justice system, but our aesthetic assessments. What is music? What is noise? Our moral feelings, what is wrong, what is right. And in general, what we see as human and not. So I love this quote here. It really helps me to think about the way that we kind of see crime as an inherent thing, whereas in a material way, it has no fact. It's not ontologically true. There's no intrinsic meaning to crime. There's no reason why something that is labeled a crime and another thing isn't. So thinking more like narrowing down a bit more into why this is important to Black expression more generally, I just want to think about a few, which Lambros mentioned, slave codes that specifically speak to instruments and music as a calling together. And that is the inherent threat and violence in it. It's not actually what is being created or necessarily the lyricism or the kind of beats, whether it's changed or whether it's the same. It's that in the creation of the music is linked to this kind of feeling of rebellion that happened in a very material way in plantation life. Like specifically, you can see in this Jamaican slave code from the 1700s that drums, trumpets, and also dances as an embodiment of those things, which is not separate from, it's within the same category, was seen as an inciting to rebellion and had to just be quelled at inception. So this was all happening, mind you, while it was used for entertainment at the same time. So it's important to think about as well. And one kind of current way that we've kind of seen this happen is with the Chris Kaba case. I don't know if any of you followed that very much. So I won't go into it too much, but essentially, Chris Kaba, who was shot by a police officer, the trial happened this year, and the officer was found not guilty of murder. Chris Kaba was also in this drill group who was just signified as a gang. And I spent a significant amount of time, too much time, on Twitter, seeing how people were talking about this. Because as you may know, drill is one of the most popular styles globally and in the UK at the moment. While this is happening, so the two are happening in tandem. It's not something that's happening, in an asynchronic kind of way. And as I trawled through the dredges of the internet, a lot of what I saw, which is super interesting to me, and I don't have the slide here, so you're just going to have to believe me, was people saying, oh, essentially he deserved this sentence. Like, why would you be doing this? Why would you be in this situation? A very moral argument of who is allowed to live and who is allowed to die, which is very similar to the base argument of colonialism. But then at the same time, the same people saying, his bars are hard though. This is a bop though. Like, I love this song though, but he deserved to die. At the very same time, in a way that kind of feels like, huh? But completely makes sense and completely in tune with how we feel about this kind of Black expression when we look at this as the foundation. So that's just something to bring the two together, so it doesn't feel like also something that's happened in the past and something that's happening now. There's no really, the cycle that we're talking about is temporal also. Past is happening now. So another way that I like to think about this is this colonial crime nexus, which is a very simple schema for understanding what we see as criminal versus what we feel is inherently criminal. So as Lambros was saying, there's violence, which is a separate thing. There's threat, which is a separate thing. And then there's harm as a separate thing. Inherently, there's violence in our existence, whether it's interpersonal, state level, all of these kind of things that we need to accept in order to live in modernity. There's no way to live now as we are and not accept violence. It's impossible. It's all around us in so many different forms. And there's no way also to negate harm, whether it's personal, whether it's at a joint level, However, it's only when violence, harm, and the threats of these two things come in together, like they actually intersect, is when you see it as criminal. And I like to think this in a big, like broad state way. If you think about Israel at the moment, violence, harm, and threat are completely separate in the imagination of what's happening over there. You know, violence is undeniable. No one can actually say it's not happening. The harm is questionable. It might be happening, maybe not, depending on which side you're on. And the threat is also very much shifted according to how you see the person that is doing the violence. If you're looking from the standpoint of Israel being a state that should exist, then the threats that they have is only conceptual. It can never actually cause harm. Anyway, I digress. What I'm actually wanting to talk about, and I say all of that, is this embodiment of Black expression. So as I said, in my PhD, I'm kind of thinking about the blues as an infrastructure for all of these things. And we have a few different kinds of Black expressions that have been criminalized. The blues in the center, I think, is interesting because I'm talking about collectiveness. And if you've seen any drill video, it's all about the collective. There is no such thing as a lone driller. Like whether it's the ad-libs in the back, if you're performing a sense that there's lots of people there, or if it's in the video, you're never alone. There's always the collective or the gang, if you prefer. So even in this very lonesome, like blues player with a guitar, the threats and the violence inherent in them is so different to the figure of the country player, which is inherently the same, a guitar, a lonesome person talking about woes, struggles, violence, wanting to kill their spouse, wanting to die, all of these things heard in a completely different way. In the same way, we've got examples here from Brazilian baile funk, from jazz, from Chicago drill, from UK drill, all of these different forms. So again, I could speak about this at length, but the idea that I'm trying to put in is that, again, we're existing in this temporal loop of the same thing happening in different ways. And it's the underlying basis of that is this anti-Black relation of violence, threat, and who can sit within that. So specifically, again, we're getting closer, stay with me, talking about gun fingers. I'm going to do a quick trace of like the lineage of that. And going back to sound systems, I'm like, obviously I knew Lambros would be here, so I have to talk about sound systems a little bit. And the idea of the gun finger coming through sound systems and dancehall culture. So there's this ethnomusicologist called Michael Veal, who talks about the techno-martial ethos of the sound clash and sound system, which I can talk to you about at length again. This idea of subverting and using the violence of colonialism and also the symbols that are used in several different societies as moments of celebration, like the 21 gun salute that existed in UK, like throughout from the 1400s onwards, you know, as a symbolic gesture of celebration through something that can kill. But is it used for that? No. So in Jamaican sound system and dancehall culture, if you ever listen to a dancehall song, Ethan, I know Ethan was like, he was playing dancehall on the way here. So I'm like, Ethan's already in the vibe. You're going to hear a boom, 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 you're going to hear a gunshot, you're going to hear all of that as a container for and a conduit for this subversion of what is seen as appropriate and what is seen as not, which is the foundation of art, if you ask me. You know? So gun fingers were a staple of sound system culture. And then moving into grime became even more like infused in a British kind of ecosystem of how you move and how you respond to music. So when I see these pictures, I'm just like, what are the bars? I want to know what they're saying because it just looks like such a, to me, a natural pull to be like, this is sick, this is fire, what is going on? The gun is such a, the gun as a gun finger is such a like physical feeling of that to me. If you see it and you're not from that culture or understanding that, it may look completely different. Why would you want to be like doing a replica of something that can only be used to kill somebody? again, if we think back to gun salutes and those things, we kind of answer our own question. But the interesting thing is then the gun finger has become this staple of popular culture, and also through jungle, garage, the rave culture, all of these things which are built on the foundations of dancehall. It has become a symbol of just enjoyment. It's something that you do to, it's a collective symbol. If you know what it means, if you know, you know. And you can see Prince Harry here versus this kind of image, the same exact symbol may call a different kind of feeling, and a different kind of moral framing of what that means. So whenever I think of gun fingers, I like to make these sort of kind of videos. Of like a festival bro, just in your face, like versus what I see, as Lambra said, I work as an expert witness in courts, and this symbol in drill, which interestingly now, as when I was a child and through like grime and sound system culture, was very much like this. Kind of as we've come through Chicago and the development of like the automatic rifle moved up to like this symbol, and also this as just like a technological reinvention of the gun. The pistol doesn't really exist anymore. Kind of reminds me of kids that do this, they do this. So that's an interesting separate thing. But in court cases in the UK, specifically the Manchester 10 case is an interesting one, which you probably heard of, where these 10 black and brown boys in Manchester were accused of the whole thing, which you can look into. But Roxy Legan, who is the head of Kids of Colour, HQ, which is a Manchester-based charity, was in the courtrooms and kind of really following the trial and supporting the boys through. And she was doing like a play-by-play of what was happening each day in the courts. And this is one of the tweets that she had at the time. And she mentioned how in the courts, again, I can kind of run you through this if you want to, how that the infrastructure of having music as evidence actually works and all of those things. But essentially in the courts, there were videos played of these boys in often very like homegrown drill videos, which were seen as like gang videos. We showed them using gun fingers. And in the court, these were seen as and labeled as gang signs. They're all doing it. Why are you all making the same hand gesture, which is a gun? Criminality, right? And in a similar way, I was working on a case recently as a 15-year-old in London accused of a drug charge, which was, there was this whole 100-page report in a completely like irrelevant way about him in this music video, which he didn't even write the lyrics to, which I think is interesting because we often so focused on you're saying something and incriminating yourself. He didn't write the lyrics. He wasn't even involved in the song making. He was in the video with at least 30 other people. And they had these stills of him zoomed in of him making this gesture and saying that it's a gang sign. And why would he be making this kind of thing if he was a good character? So this is used as bad character evidence, not just as specifically gang affiliation, like you're in this specific gang, but you are a gang member. What's the gang? Blackness? We don't know, but you're like a gang member specifically by using the sign. And again, the gun finger just so happily sits within this framework and the schema of criminality for all of these reasons. But I'm going to stop there and essentially say that, you know, Tariq said I'm part of this organization, Art and Evidence, where we are trying to fight or protect the right to creative expression and have it not used in courts, which you can ask me more about as well. But I think I've said enough, to be honest. So thank you for listening. And this is my book. So yeah.